Hey everyone, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I'm your host, Marissa Tandon, and this is the second part of my two-part conversation with Tyler Hyrchuk. If you missed the first half of this conversation, make sure to scroll back in your player and find the last episode before starting this one.
I would instinctively be pushed towards creative things, but I don't know that I did a lot of productions. I did go to a theater camp, I want to say in grade 8, 7 maybe, the summer. And ironically enough, it was, I believe, Treasure Island, and I was a pirate. So it comes full circle.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Pirate to pirate to pirate.
Yeah.
Or I guess kidnapped. It sounds like the book was from the grandchild's perspective. So grandchild of kidnapped by pirate.
Exactly. And that was also the kind of the original sort of like Uber Eats delivery driver sort of thing, where the pirates were all the Uber Eats drivers, but they were just picking up food for themselves, I guess. I don't know.
I love it. I love it. Well, we've talked a lot about how it kind of started your, like, Grandma and the Pirates, and this sort of moment of showing your parents that you could be a performer sparked that urge later on. But you also mentioned with, like, this Leif Erikson thing, as you got older, almost a hesitation to, like, your first instinct was to go full out, and then after a couple of seconds to drop it and go into a smaller, less ham it up situation. Was there a moment that you remember saying kind of like, fuck it to that scared part of your brain, or a moment that you remember like having to start to fight through that instinct to let it go, to stop being a performer?
I think that still happens, actually. I find that in a piece of feedback that I get time and time again from casting directors when I'm doing auditions is more. And then 3 or 4 takes in, they're like, why didn't you start there? And a lot of voice actors get that note, I feel. And I think what it was back then was, even though I was hiding behind a beautifully crafted cardboard mask of Leif Erikson, maybe I wasn't hidden enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so being behind a microphone, like I recorded for a kids animated series that's coming out later this year. And there were a couple times they had a webcam in there and they were cackling with the movements I was making, flapping my arms around and stuff. And for whatever reason, I'm okay with it when it's just in an enclosed space. And it's like, these people here understand, and I'm using my limbs and I'm really bringing this to life. But just on camera doesn't appeal to me. So I don't know if that's the audiobook aspect of the book on tape, and then kind of just staying behind the camera, writing. I like stand-up, but I don't see myself ever really doing much stand-up. Like those storytelling vibes kind of thing.
That's interesting, because I think you're talking about like that like crave of performance, but almost like a lack of desire to be perceived at the same time, which feel like those would be two things that are very at war with each other. But then voice acting does seem like it can marry those two instincts, I guess.
Right. And then at the same time, I do improv as well. So, which is weird because, I'm on stage and I'm just making it up as I go. But then the kind of planning part of me is like, oh, I'm creating like a sketch comedy bit now. And so I pre-plan, and then it's not fully improvised. And then, so learning to live in the moment, learning not to, parrot what somebody else did. Still learning.
Yeah. I always get into I love talking about improv versus stand-up, and a lot of people think that they go hand in hand with each other, but I think they're completely opposing skill sets to some degree. But I'm intrigued that it sounds like, as someone who like plans, it almost feels like stand-up would be a better fit for you. But do you feel like improv is something that you're doing because it pushes you, or you have the support of other people on stage that make it a little less scary?
Definitely pushes me, definitely the support. I think improv also has, I guess, a more noticeable positive effect on the voiceover work that I do.
Sure.
But, I've been parroting throughout my life other people's jokes, and I'm wondering if it's because I know that they work that I'm happy to repeat them.
Oh, okay.
Whereas with stand-up, I'll be writing my own material, and if it doesn't work, that means I'm not funny.
Yeah.
So even in the storytelling aspect of telling somebody else's joke, if it doesn't work, they're not funny.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no accountability on me.
Yeah. Do you think that's part of like why you prefer to have a script, like with a voice actor?
Yeah, probably. And then I don't have to memorize it, right? Which is another aspect that I love about VO versus on camera. And with improv, there's no memorization either. You just pull it out of your ass.
Yeah. I like that idea of like the fear of accountability of being funny, being the funny one, and finding the performance of allowing it, like if it flopped, oh, it was the writer's fault. Or I obviously with Peculiar Radio, you've been involved on all sides of it, so that perhaps it doesn't have that same sort of safety net that you feel like you might have elsewhere. But when you're talking about like voice acting, when you're talking about the animated show and repeating Grandma and the Pirates or Russell Peters' Comedy Now special or other comedians, this idea of like I mean, it wasn't really my fault. It wasn't my performance or it wasn't my content that wasn't good. It was somebody else's, and I was just sort of, doing my job kind of element.
Absolutely. And even kind of going into the reactive versus generative side of things. I know in talk radio, they try to pick people if it's like a show team.
Mm-hmm.
One person is a generator, one person is a reactor. I definitely consider myself a reactor. So I think that's also why stand-up doesn't appeal to me as much, because I would have to be generating and then reacting. Whereas in improv, I can come in and I can react off of the offers that are being given to me.
Are you in improv typically the person who jumps out first, or do you need someone to throw the first line and then come in and sort of yes-and it?
I think I can do both. I think that my issue recently, at least, I've been taking more classes recently, and teachers are like, you're too focused on plot. Like, focus on the relationship. Or my character doesn't have a strong enough, like, if I'm coming in jealous, I need to be jealous with everything. I should not suddenly be flip-flopping. And so that's, something that I need to learn and hammer down. But I find that even in writing, in the writer's room for Peculiar Radio, I would be punching stuff up from myself, or we'll read through a scene and then I'll be like, oh, what if you tried this joke here? What if you tried that joke there? So again, reacting off of somebody else's groundwork.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you talk about, like, a lot of times the craft of improv is not talked about as much outside of improv spaces. And so you can get into this circle where people sort of think like, oh, you just hop up there and do it. But there is so much, I don't know what type of improv you do, if it's short form or long form or a herald or game based or those types of things. But I've probably just lost 50% of the people listening as I started speaking another language, right?
Is it like, whose line is it anyway? Is that what you're talking about?
Which even that is like short form game-based improv, which is fun and easy to consume, but requires a lot of skill to be built to be able to, I mean, those guys did that show together for decades, it feels like, because they came back. And Wayne Brady in particular is like one that I have such a love for that show. Actually, I watched it growing up so much because it was on, I think they used to play it on Nick at Night.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not up here. We got it on the Comedy Network, but yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it was like in the same block as like Fresh Prince, Whose Line Is It Anyway, and like Friends, like that nighttime block where you're sort of just old enough to still be watching like that late at night kind of thing.
Right. And they're also reacting, right? They're reacting to suggestions from the audience. They're reacting to their scene partners. And in improv, just like with, I guess, a lot of arts things, you take years and years and years to learn all the rules, and then you hit a point where you're like, oh, there are no rules. And then you can play around all the rules that you've learned, whereas people who are just watching, they're like, oh, that's funny, but they don't realize why it works.
Yeah, agreed. I think I remember the first time after I had taken like an improv 101 class. My poor improv studio has since gone defunct, but I absolutely loved working there. But the first time I had taken like improv 101 and learned like this is what a herald is. And I remember watching the like house team that week do a herald and being like, oh, I finally get how magical this is, because it can feel scripted when they get to the end, but it is just really like being so in tune and so willing to react, and also getting rid of that feeling that you talked about with the Leif Erikson side of performance, which is being willing to go to the top of your response and just knowing that the other person on stage is going to match your energy, so that by the end it feels like you referenced something that happened 30 minutes ago and people are like, oh my God, that was magic. But it really is just, it's just listening and reacting and paying attention.
Absolutely. And recently an improv teacher was talking to us about, setting up your scene partner. I don't want to get too into the weeds in improv, but so for example, say you've done a first beat with somebody and they're like the jealous person, and then you want to bring them back in a second beat so somebody else pulls them in, and they set it up where it's like, oh, do I want to do jealousy? Maybe I don't know that I want to do jealousy. Anyways, jealous person, whatever. And you start a scene with them and the audience knows that they're going to be that jealous person again. And it's like, oh man, my mom just died. I'm like, oh, I wish my mom just, right? So the offer is morbid, but it works because you know that they have to be jealous about it. And so the audience laughs at the, oh, I wish my mom. Whereas the improvisers in the audience are like, nice offer. Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. Right? So it's like, game appreciates game kind of thing. You understand how it works. You understand how you got to there. But yes, fortunately, my mother is still alive and watching this or listening to this, I'm assuming.
It's just a joke format. We don't mean anything by it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I love the reference as well to like the game recognizes game. I can't for the life of me remember which stand-up comedian talked about it, but he was like, performing for other stand-ups is the worst because nobody actually laughs. Like they just say like, oh, that was funny. And that's like the highest praise you can get is like, that was funny, not a laugh. And I think it's interesting that you kind of talk about the offer and the reception of that offer because it really does require, I think, all types of performance and voice acting as well. And just even when you get into a space of like writing a script and handing that to an actor and going from stage to stage, it requires a level of trust that I think is really important because you have to know like, I'm going to put my all on the page and then I'm going to hand it to you and I'm going to have to just trust that you're going to not only like take this level that I've given you on the page, but heighten it. And then when I get it back or I'm directing you, I'm going to heighten your version of it. And so that hopefully by the time we get to the end, we've gotten to the best possible version. But at any point in that production process, if someone goes, oh, I hope they probably would think that that's, too much. Let me just pull it back a little bit. Then you get further away from that best version. So if like as a writer, you're worried about either if you're writing the whole thing, you're worried about like what the actor's going to see when they get it or what the other writers in the room are going to think of it. And you pull back, then you miss that chance of someone looking at it in the room and saying, oh, well, wouldn't it be even funnier if you took it here? You're just missing one level each time you don't trust that next person in the process.
Yes. No, absolutely, 100%. And talking about these stand-ups who are like, oh, that's funny. Oh, that's hilarious. Great premise. I think improvisers, for the most part, laugh harder than just non-improviser audience members.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's another added, support base.
Yeah, I always, because I've done both. And I always say, like, you can perform improv to an empty room, like an empty audience, as long as you have one improviser watching versus like if you're in a room full of stand-ups, you just better hope you don't need to hear a laugh. Yeah. Like it's just not going to happen. They're not paying attention. They are paying attention. They're not laughing, or it's just it's a very different energy.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. There's been times too where I remember last year we were doing a buddy's bachelor party and someone was like, what if we went to a stand-up show later? And I was like, yeah, great. I'll find a thing. And I didn't realize that it ended up being improv. And we walked in and there were 4 or 5 of us. And, the MC comes on. It's like, it's going to be a bunch of improv, a little bit of stand-up, but mainly improv. My one friend was like, oh, really? Because I guess they're a big stand-up fan.
Okay.
But I was like, no, that's great. Like,
yeah,
I like both things, but I am much more satisfied when I go in to watch improv and it's so-so versus when I go in to watch a comedian and it's so-so.
Yeah, bad stand-up is like impossible to find like an enjoyment of. And I think also a lot of that time is sometimes it's taste and if you don't like someone's style of comedy and stand-up, you're not gonna enjoy yourself until it's over.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it look, Dane Cook gets made fun of all the time, right? But so I instantly thought of that. But like Dane Cook makes comedy for a certain type of person, and if you're not that type of person, it's gonna be an hour of torture. And if you are that type of person, it's an hour of giggles. And on the flip side, like Bo Burnham does very cerebral, smart comedy, and if you are not the type of person that wants to sit there and think or enjoys musical comedy, that could be someone's special hell. But improv, improv, like I always feel like even bad improv, as long as people are committing to it, like there's going to be at least one moment where it just requires the audience to buy in as much as the improvisers are doing as well.
Exactly. And even if they're doing a scene and one of the improvisers is not great, but the other improviser is doing so much with what they're doing, it still saves itself. I remember being in a scene where my scene partner, it was a class show. And so this person had maybe taken one like set of classes before. And so they do this character monologue where they're my mom And, it was going well. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this is great. And I'm just nodding along and I'm a kid. And then they go, have you noticed that everything's red? And I was like, where is this going? And they're like, did you notice the sky is red? Did you notice that I'm not really your mom and we're on Mars?
Oh, no.
And then they went and like pretended to pull off their face.
Yeah.
And the monologue had been about how like my dad left and this and that. And like they were a strong mom to me growing up. And it got so fantastical. And the audience probably was like, what is going on? And so they're like, I'm not really your mom. And they pull off their mask. And the only thing I could think to say in that moment was, Dad? And that got a laugh because subverted expectations, right? And if there wasn't that button, or I was just like, whoa, you're an alien, people would be like, yeah, they're an alien, whatever.
Yeah. I always think like the only thing that can make improv unwatchable is when someone doesn't want to be there. Like someone is too embarrassed to be on stage or is like consistently disagreeing and is just like the worst. And as long as you're personally, I think, and I didn't used to feel this way. I was not a big improv fan outside of Whose Line Is It Anyway at Nick at Night. But like improv took me a long time to get behind, mostly because it stressed me out. Like the concept of not having a plan and just going on stage. But once you get to the point that you've done improv with people you trust, that's where it starts to be fun. But I think that's where you also start to recognize that if someone is on stage and isn't respecting that trust of the rest of the team, that's where it becomes unwatchable, because you just have one person being like, man, isn't this dumb? Wink. Like, don't we all look dumb? Like, no.
Yep. And improv, especially when we were growing up, was not really accessible. Apart from Whose Line, you'd have to go to shows. And you're a kid. You can't go to improv shows on your own. But stand-up was a lot more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. The YouTube era of just being able to kind of watch it. And also, I was making fun of Dane Cook earlier, but I learned a lot of comedy from Dane Cook, which is such a stressful thing to say, but I think it's like a gateway kind of situation.
It's a gateway drug, yeah.
Yeah, but my sister and I when I got my my driver's license, I would drive her to school, and I think probably illegally at the time on like LimeWire or something, I had like all the Dane Cook specials like downloaded audio wise, and so we still like make fun of like still like we'll repeat like the BK Lounge or like some of his like more famous bits, but it was more so that it was I think looking back on Dane Cook specifically, it was that he was at that heightened level that I could not get to myself in like my own personality at that age. Like I was not trying to be screaming about anything.
Right.
I was trying very much to like stay in my lane. So we would listen to those specials and like repeat them. But because you were repeating someone else, like some dorky, loud guy that was doing stadium shows and was shouting, it was cool. It was fine.
And he's almost like the Disney equivalent comedian. Like it's heightened, it's not realistic, it's not conversational. And I would compare his style as like a Family Channel sitcom.
Yes.
To like an ABC sitcom, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because even watching shows, like we were talking a little bit beforehand about the acting on some shows, it's super over the top, it's not grounded, it's not realistic. And Dane Cook is that, basically, I think.
Yeah, I agree with like not the Disney subject matter for sure.
Oh, no.
But that over heightened like I think also especially at that age too, you don't like comedy is that. Like I was talking with someone, I was actually talking with Moretta about like how when I was growing up, like comedy was like Jackass and that style of comedy, which I still to this day, like the new movie came out, I thought it was so fun. I think like that reckless abandon of being able to I think the reason it's so appealing at that age, like as a teenager, whether it's Dane Cook or Jack, I hate to put the two of them in the same category because they are one is really good and one is Dane Cook. But I think it's that even going to Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's that willingness to embarrass yourself in front of a group of people for comedy that I think at that age, like 13, 14, and so on, you are starting to understand how embarrassing being alive can be. And so watching people like be willing to not only embarrass themselves, but like want to, and that getting a laugh, I think it starts to connect to those wires of comedy in your brain at that point. Yeah.
And I remember one of the LimeWire videos that I downloaded. Was LimeWire or BearShare or I'm probably going to say this wrong, Kazaa, Kazaa, or Kazaa.
Oh, I didn't know that one. Okay.
was Kenny Rogers' Jackass with Will Sasso on Mad TV.
Yeah.
Iconic. And Mad TV had a couple years. And I mean, Miss Swan, Alex Borstein doing Miss Swan. I used to do that voice for my mom's friends, right? Like,
Yeah. No, it's so much of like parody, like being like, "Oh, like I laughed at this. I bet you other people would laugh at this. Let me like learn it exactly right." And I do wonder if it was like, because I think people still do this now. I don't think it's like a product of the time of not being able to turn it around and show someone. Like you didn't have a cell phone or anything like that. But I think there's like a desire to share it with people in a performance way, as opposed to simply being like, Mom, Dad, come sit down and watch this funny video that I just watched. You like have the instinct to instead tell the story yourself and be like, you're never going to believe this, but like Johnny Knoxville, he's in his 50s now, and he was like, I got to get hit by a bull one last time. And so he goes through and you explain the whole thing, and there's almost like you want the laugh to be your laugh, even though it's somebody else's joke.
Exactly. And going back to what I was saying is like, it's tried and tested material. And if your audience doesn't laugh, it's because the material wasn't funny. And if your audience laughs, it's because you told the material right.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting how I'm sure if you asked someone who has no desire to be like on stage, so to speak, as a performer in any capacity, they would be like, no, when I see something funny, I either keep it to myself and enjoy my laugh, or I send the video link to someone. And that's probably the response of someone who just enjoys sharing comedy with people, as opposed to one day you're going to be a star. Like,
Yep. Yeah, a comedy meme lord of sorts.
yeah. And meme is a great example of it too, because so much of comedy now, when we talk about like how things have changed generationally, like are on TikTok. People are doing exactly what we're talking about, which is that it's very much sound based. You take the same sound, you aren't using your voice. You're either performing it, you're mimicking it, you're lip syncing it to some degree and adding your own little punchline to it. And so you're doing exactly what we're talking about, but instead of your stage being like your parents or your friends from school, it is like millions of people on the internet, or a couple hundred if your video's not doing well and you're sad.
Is there a personal connection there, Marissa? Or is that...
Thank you very much. My videos do great on TikTok. No, I think no, I just think it's interesting that like it actually is funny, because kids now will talk about like, oh, my video only got like 500 views, and I'm like, I get caught in that same feeling of like using TikTok and wanting to use comedy and have people do it. But then you're like, oh, if you had 400 people in a room watching you tell a joke, you would feel like the biggest success. Yeah. It's interesting how like the wider your reach gets from the internet itself, the smaller success feels, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even I don't do a lot of performative reels on Instagram, but it's linked to my Facebook. So when I post a reel, it'll share with Facebook. And I did one last year, and then I got a notification a few days later, and it was like 2,000 people watched your reel. And I was like, sick. And then I was like, but how many more can I get?
Yeah.
So for 2 seconds, I'm happy with 2,000. And then all of a sudden I'm like, why not 10,000?
Yeah. Why didn't millions of people watch this? Why don't I have a television deal from this one silly little video?
There was one guy who I didn't know, and I didn't realize that my reel was like public, and he just commented and he was like, I wish I had those 2 minutes of my life back. And I was like, thanks, Craig.
The negative comments are infuriating sometimes, because like obviously you open yourself up to it because you put it on the internet and you made it public or whatever. But then I'm also so fascinated, like Craig, 2 minutes of your life that you were already spending scrolling through other people's Instagram reels, you weren't going to do anything productive with it anyway. I'm sorry, Craig.
Nope.
Sorry to Craig if you're listening, but
no,
you're
Craig's a
on
dick.
my shit list. Yeah. You're on my no longer a fan of list. No, I think it's interesting, like how much like the same thing, it almost feels like the response is like when we're talking about the joy of performing an entire improv show for 5 other improvisers and how wonderful that can feel. And then like the online aspect of, oh man, like not enough people watched it. Why didn't more people watch it? I like that 1,000 people liked it, but why didn't 1,000,000 people like it? And then the devastation of one negative comment feels so much bigger, where it's almost like being caught in that. It's the same thing people say about dating apps. Like you can swipe left because there's hundreds or thousands of people more underneath that person, where it's just like the span of it feels like nothing. There is no top. There is no like success point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the critic in me definitely comes out when friends share stuff and I'll be like, oh, that was fake. Or,
Mm.
yeah, but so is everything that's written on TV is fake,
Yeah.
right? So figure it out, Tyler. But going a little bit back to the improv stuff, it's like when you throw out a suggestion and they use your suggestion, that's so validating.
Yeah.
I remember I was watching a show last Sunday and they asked for a suggestion about a dynamic. And they ended up going with architect and assistant architect. But I had yelled out tax attorney and dominatrix, which I think would be a hilarious set. And the host who was in the crowd, he looked over at me and was like, what? So afterwards, I was like, great show, awesome job. I saw that you appreciated he's like, yeah, I've never heard like a combination like that. So I got the appreciation from the host being like, that was a great suggestion. That would have been hilarious. But yeah, again, seeking validation.
Yeah, I think it's, that's what it all comes down to. It's just that we're all desperate for validation, regardless of what it is. And to bring it back to what we started with, which kind of started your desire for validation of Grandma and the Pirates and your performance there, I think there's something interesting too of it sounds like you already had that itch probably in you somehow when you started to learn and memorize and mimic of this audiobook is making me happy and so I'm going to memorize it, and then it's an accident that someone heard you do it to some degree, and then that sort of sparks that desire to keep seeking that same feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now we're here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that almost leads us perfectly to the final question I always ask, which is if you had never read Grandma and the Pirates, or I suppose technically listened to and had read to Grandma and the Pirates, what do you think would be different about you today?
I probably would have read The Balloon Tree a lot more. Does that connect with you, that book? No?
I don't know. I've never heard of The Balloon Tree.
It's another Phoebe Gilman book.
It's so funny how, I think we're 2 years apart and obviously different countries as well. But it's so funny how small differences can change. I was like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I think that I would have figured it out later in life, but it would have been me parroting something else, probably.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the positive and supportive environment that I grew up in, it's like, oh, you did a thing, great job. And fortunately for me, my sister was also supportive of my kind of performative over-the-topness, and she wasn't competing for it as much. So even when babysitters would come over, my sister would do ballet and had a tutu, and I'd put the tutu on, and I'd dance for her and my babysitter to the point where she's like, Tyler, you getting the tutu on? Egging me on because she appreciated it. And so she was very supportive as well. And I think because it was very much an environment of, entertain us, dance, 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 but also we love when you do this. And then that made me love to do it.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it, I don't know if you've talked to your family about this, but I wonder how much of it was, we think it's funny when you do it, or how much of it was, we see how happy it makes you when we respond to it. And there's that same, I think, obviously adults can look at kids and see more than kids can see in themselves. So I do wonder sometimes when parents look and they see, okay, when I laugh, it really brightens, you can see that it's food for the soul.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even going to kids' first laughs, or kids who laugh because somebody else is laughing and they don't get it, but they see that person is enjoying themselves. Oh, if I laugh, they'll enjoy themselves more. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's lovely. I'm glad that you had the type of family who was like, yeah, put the tutu on, dance away, do Grandma and the Pirates over and over again, because it's a cool thing. And it sounds like they were able to sort of recognize that performer in you at a young age and sort of just continue to feed it until you found your way to proper performance.
Absolutely. And I'm realizing now, this late in the podcast, how often I say absolutely. To be fair, my other career path that I don't know if my dad talked me out of. I think he was supportive of, I was going to do carpentry.
Okay.
And then I was like, I don't know. And then I took a half victory lap after high school because I graduated and I was more or less honor roll every year, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I was like, I could work with my hands. My dad's like, dude, there's always work for carpenters. It's, an in-demand. But I think that little performance itch just won out.
Yeah, I wonder how much the Lego would have been what we would have talked about today.
Very true. And thank you for dropping the S.
Just for you, Tyler. Just for you. Well, thank you so much for sharing and hanging out. And I am very happy to talk about improv and comedy and building blocks all the time. So this is a delight for me as well.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And for those listening, Yeah, that was Grandma and the Pirates. You probably saw the title and you were like, this is going to be a 5-minute episode.
Or you were like, what pirates? What grandma? Regardless, you found out what the answer is. And also, if you're listening now and you enjoyed the number of voices that Tyler just kind of threw into the episode on demand, or you want to hear what type of performer and writer and sound designer and producer he has grown into these days, or you just want to hear the voice behind the silent Shrimpy the Shrimp, please feel free to check out Peculiar Radio, because I have enjoyed it myself, so I think you guys will too. And now you've gotten to know one of the voices behind and a little bit of the inspiration, so you can go in with a different mindset too and enjoy the show.
Yes, thank you very much for all of that. I really appreciate it. Definitely go check it out, guys. In the first episode, I play a hero and a villain talking to each other, so that's a lot of fun. But the beauty of this show, to get on my tiny little soapbox just for a second, is it's a collective of voice actors who are like, they don't have a lot of credits. Let's create something to give ourselves the opportunity to perform and create. And we didn't wait around for it to happen, and we did it ourselves, which is awesome. And I'm sure you can agree and understand that side of things, Marissa, as a performer, a creator, all the stuff that you've done for Tandon. I'm sure I've auditioned for a few of your productions in the past too.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think that feeling of like not waiting around is so difficult, especially I went to film school and I did like the typical path of going and trying to work at a network and find your way into a writer's room and all of those things, and performing is a whole other beast. And I think that's also part of why I say like, oh, I'm certainly not a voice actor first, is because it's harder. It's more stressful to do it, and so it's hard to kind of keep putting that energy in. And so I think, especially in podcasting and in audio drama specifically, it gives you that chance to kind of, I mean, it's part of why I do this show, part of why I've done the other shows that I've done, and it sounds like why you guys have done Peculiar Radio as well, which is like waiting for someone to tell you the story that you want to tell is worth telling, or be a part of telling that story. It just sometimes can make you forget why you want to tell stories in the first place, because you're waiting for someone to tell you that, oh, this idea that you have or this story that's important to you is marketable, people are going to watch it, and we will make money from it. And those are all important things. And they are very important things that make a business go round. But there's also the importance of the fact that sometimes the stories that people need to hear are not the stories that necessarily are checking those marketing boxes. And so I think the kind of spirit of audio drama and the spirit of podcasting is people getting together and doing it. And I get to tell jokes and laugh for an hour and a half once a week and put that out there with this show and do the same thing there. So I think I'm excited about you guys and these sort of actors coming together, the voice actors coming together to kind of say like, okay, well, I know I can do this. I know I have a good story to tell, and I know this group of people is going to support each other the same way we've talked about with improv and with comedy. So putting it out there and allowing other people to hear it, as opposed to just waiting for someone to say, yeah, that one out of the 30, you get to come through the golden gates. That's the part where I think like we just miss out on so much good content.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure you've also experienced this in your journey too. You find that you're doing things that you didn't realize were a job, and you're getting great at them. Like, who joins the arts or who joins the industry is like, I'm going to be the best casting director there's ever been.
Right.
And then, like, we have a phenomenal directing team, and I don't know that any of them had directed prior to this show, but they just put their hands up at the beginning when they're like, who wants to direct? And they've been doing a phenomenal job. And a few of them, I'm sure, will go on and direct other podcasts or other productions because they've learned these skills. Yeah,
absolutely. I think especially in a sense where like you are trying, everything has to get done, so someone has to do it. That is, I really truly did not view myself as a director prior to starting in audio drama. And it was really a sense of like, someone has to do it. Like, you wrote the script. I've got friends who are actors that they'll do it, and obviously it's grown to a different space now, but directing is like one of my favorite parts of it. Getting to sit there and work with actors and give weird directions of like, can you do that but sound like you're picking something up, and put a little bit more stress in your voice and huff a couple times, and can you run around in a circle in the booth and that'll make it sound more real, those types of things, and working with it. I think a lot of it is, yeah, like you're saying, like, oh, I didn't know you could do that as a job, but now I'm determined I have the skill set to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful.
I feel like we've created this dynamic of, no, you hang up. No, you hang up.
Yeah, I know.
So
I know, we've done it so many times.
And I'll let you wrap things up.
Well, yes, I again, as much as obviously we are two teenagers running up a phone bill, and I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to it. I will say my goodbyes and say my thank yous and say that I had a wonderful time hanging out today, and I hope everyone listening did too. Thank you again, Tyler. Had a fun time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode of You Are What You Love, be sure to catch the other episodes I did with members of the Peculiar Radio team. You can scroll back to listen to episodes with Moretta Mose, J.K. Robbins, and Alyssa Esteban, and hear more about the rest of the team's journeys through fandom and creativity. Between now and next Wednesday, if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me on social media at Marissa Kamari, anywhere you get your social media fix. You can also sign up for my newsletter by going to our website, tandonproductions.com, clicking on You Are What You Love, and signing up there. I send out an issue with every episode of this podcast. And we just started a Discord server, so if you want to connect with me, with other listeners, and talk about the types of things that we are talking about on this show, you can join that by clicking on the link in the episode description. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.